Welcome to a fireside reading of David Copperfield by Charles Dickens, Chapter 33, Part 2. I suppose that when I saw Dora in the garden and pretended not to see her and rode past the house pretending to be anxiously looking for it, I committed two small fooleries which other young gentlemen in my circumstances might have committed, because they came so very natural to me. But oh, when I did find the house and did dismount at the garden gate and drag those stony-hearted boots across the lawn to Dora, sitting on a garden seat under a lilac tree, what a spectacle she was upon that beautiful morning, among the butterflies, in a white chip bonnet and a dress of celestial blue. There was a young lady with her, comparatively stricken in years, almost 20, I should say. Her name was Miss Mills, and Dora called her Julia. She was the bosom friend of Dora. Happy Miss Mills. Jip was there, and Jip would bark at me again. When I presented my bouquet, he gnashed his teeth with jealousy. Well, he might, if he had the least idea how I adored his mistress. Well, he might.
"Oh, thank you, Mr. Copperfield. What dear flowers,"
said Dora. I had had an intention of saying, and had been studying the best form of words for 3 miles, that I thought them beautiful before I saw them so near her. But I couldn't manage it. She was too bewildering. To see her lay the flowers against her little dimpled chin was to lose all presence of mind and power of language in a feeble ecstasy. I wonder if I didn't say, "Kill me, if you have a heart, Miss Mills. Let me die here." Then Dora held my flowers to Jip to smell. Then Jip growled and wouldn't smell them. Then Dora laughed and held them a little closer to Jip to make him. Then Jip laid hold of a bit of geranium with his teeth and worried imaginary cats in it. Then Dora beat him and pouted and said,
"My poor beautiful flowers,"
as compassionately, I thought, as if Jip had laid hold of me. I wished he had.
"You'll be glad to hear, Mr. Copperfield,"
said Dora,
that cross Miss Murdstone is not here. She has gone to her brother's marriage and will be away at least 3 weeks. Isn't that delightful?"
I said I was sure it must be delightful to her, and all that was delightful to her was delightful to me. Miss Mills, with an air of superior wisdom and benevolence, smiled upon us.
"She is the most disagreeable thing I ever saw," said Dora. "You can't believe how ill-tempered and shocking she is, Julia."
"Yes, I can, my dear," said Julia.
"You can, perhaps, love,"
returned Dora, with her hand on Julia's.
"Forgive my not accepting you, my dear, at first."
I learned from this that Miss Mills had had her trials in the course of a checkered existence, and that to these perhaps I might refer that wise benignity of manner which I had already noticed. I found in the course of the day that this was the case, Miss Mills having been unhappy in a misplaced affection, and being understood to have retired from the world on her awful stock of experience, but still to take a calm interest in the unblighted hopes and loves of youth. But now Mr. Spenlow came out of the house, and Dora went to him, saying,
"Look, Papa, what beautiful flowers!"
And Miss Mills smiled thoughtfully, as who should say, "Ye mayflies, enjoy your brief existence in the bright morning of life." And we all walked from the lawn towards the carriage, which was getting ready. I shall never have such a ride again. I have never had such another. There were only those three, their hamper, my hamper, and the guitar case in the phaeton, and of course the phaeton was open, and I rode behind it, and Dora sat with her back to the horses, looking towards me. She kept the bouquet close to her on the cushion, and wouldn't allow Jip to sit on that side of her at all for fear he should crush it. She often carried it in her hand, often refreshed herself with its fragrance. Our eyes at those times often met, and my great astonishment is that I didn't go over the head of my gallant grey into the carriage. There was dust, I believe. There was a good deal of dust, I believe. I have a faint impression that Mr. Spenlow remonstrated with me for riding in it, but I knew of none. I was sensible of a mist of love and beauty about Dora, but of nothing else. He stood up sometimes and asked me what I thought of the prospect. I said it was delightful, and I dare say it was, but it was all Dora to me. The sun shone, Dora, and the birds sang, Dora. The south wind blew, Dora, and the wild flowers in the hedges were all Dora's to a bud. My comfort is Miss Mills understood me. Miss Mills alone could enter into my feelings thoroughly. I don't know how long we were going, and to this hour I know as little where we went. Perhaps it was near Guildford. Perhaps some Arabian night magician opened up the place for the day and shut it up forever when we came away. It was a green spot on a hill carpeted with soft turf. There were shady trees and heather, and as far as the eye could see, a rich landscape. It was a trying thing to find people here, waiting for us, and my jealousy even of the ladies knew no bounds. But all of my own sex, especially one impostor, 3 or 4 years my elder, with a red whisker on which he established an amount of presumption not to be endured, were my mortal foes. We all unpacked our baskets and employed ourselves in getting dinner ready. Red Whisker pretended he could make a salad, which I don't believe, and obtruded himself on public notice. Some of the young ladies washed the lettuces for him and sliced them under his directions. Dora was among these. I felt that fate had pitted me against this man, and one of us must fall. Red Whisker made his salad. I wondered how they could eat it. Nothing should have induced me to touch it. And voted himself into the charge of the wine cellar, which he constructed, being an ingenious beast, in the hollow trunk of a tree. By and by I saw him, with the majority of a lobster on his plate, eating his dinner at the feet of Dora. I have but an indistinct idea of what happened for some time after this baleful object presented itself to my view. I was very merry, I know, but it was hollow merriment. I attached myself to a young creature in pink with little eyes and flirted with her desperately. She received my attentions with favour, but whether on my account solely or because she had any designs on Red Whisker, I can't say. Dora's health was drunk. When I drank it, I affected to interrupt my conversation for that purpose and to resume it immediately afterwards. I caught Dora's eye as I bowed to her, and I thought it looked appealing. But it looked at me over the head of Red Whisker, and I was adamant. The young creature in pink had a mother in green, and I rather think the latter separated us from motives of policy. Howbeit, there was a general breaking up of the party while the remnants of the dinner were being put away, and I strolled off by myself among the trees in a raging and remorseful state. I was debating whether I should pretend that I was not well and fly, I don't know where, upon my gallant grey, when Dora and Miss Mills met me. "Mr. Copperfield," said Miss Mills, "you are dull." I begged her pardon, not at all. "And Dora," said Miss Mills, "you are dull." "Oh dear, no, not in the least." "Mr. Copperfield and Dora," said Miss Mills, with almost a venerable air, "enough of this. Do not allow a trivial misunderstanding to wither the blossoms of spring, which once put forth and blighted cannot be renewed. I speak," said Miss Mills, "from experience of the past, the remote, irrevocable past. The gushing fountains which sparkle in the sun must not be stopped in mere caprice. The oasis in the desert of Sahara must not be plucked up idly." I hardly knew what I did. I was burning all over to that extraordinary extent, but I took Dora's little hand and kissed it, and she let me. I kissed Miss Mills's hand, and we all seemed, to my thinking, to go straight up to the seventh heaven. We did not come down again. We stayed up there all the evening. At first we strayed to and fro among the trees, I with Dora's shy arm drawn through mine, and heaven knows, folly as it all was, it would have been a happy fate to have been struck immortal with those foolish feelings, and have stayed among the trees forever. But much too soon we heard the others laughing and talking and calling, "Where's Dora?" So we went back, and they wanted Dora to sing. Red Whisker would have got the guitar case out of the carriage, but Dora told him nobody knew where it was, but I. So Red Whisker was done for in a moment, and I got it, and I unlocked it, and I took the guitar out, and I sat by her, and I held her handkerchief and gloves, and I drank in every note of her dear voice, and she sang to me, who loved her. And all the others might applaud as much as they liked, but they had nothing to do with it. I was intoxicated with joy. I was afraid it was too happy to be real, and that I should wake in Buckingham Street presently and hear Mrs. Crupp clinking the teacups in getting breakfast ready. But Dora sang, and others sang, and Miss Mills sang, about the slumbering echoes in the caverns of memory, as if she were 100 years old. And the evening came on, and we had tea with the kettle boiling gypsy fashion, and I was still as happy as ever. I was happier than ever when the party broke up, and the other people, defeated Red Whisker and all, went their several ways, and we went hours through the still evening and the dying light, with sweet scents rising up around us. Mr. Spenlow, being a little drowsy after the champagne, honour to the soil that grew the grape, to the grape that made the wine, to the sun that ripened it, and to the merchant who adulterated it, and being fast asleep in a corner of the carriage, I rode by the side and talked to Dora. She admired my horse and patted him. Oh, what a dear little hand it looked upon a horse. And her shawl would not keep right, and now and then I drew it round her with my arm, and I even fancied that Jip began to see how it was, and to understand that he must make up his mind to be friends with me. That sagacious Miss Mills, too, that amiable, though quite used-up recluse, that little patriarch of something less than 20, who had done with the world and mustn't on any account have the slumbering echoes in the caverns of memory awakened. What a kind thing she did. "Mr. Copperfield," said Miss Mills,
Come to this side of the carriage a moment, if you can spare a moment. I want to speak to you.
Behold me on my gallant grey, bending at the side of Miss Mills, with my hand upon the carriage door.
Dora is coming to stay with me. She is coming home with me the day after tomorrow. If you would like to call, I am sure Papa would be happy to see you.
What could I do but invoke a silent blessing on Miss Mills's head, and store Miss Mills's address in the securest corner of my memory? What could I do but tell Miss Mills, with grateful looks and fervent words, how much I appreciated her good offices, and what an inestimable value I set upon her friendship? Then Miss Mills benignantly dismissed me, saying, "Go back to Dora." And I went, and Dora leaned out of the carriage to talk to me, and we talked all the rest of the way, and I rode my gallant grey so close to the wheel that I grazed his near foreleg against it, and took the bark off, as his owner told me, to the tune of £3.7, which I paid and thought extremely cheap for so much joy. What time Miss Mills sat looking at the moon, murmuring verses and recalling, I suppose, the ancient days when she and earth had anything in common. Norwood was many miles too near, and we reached it many hours too soon. But Mr. Spenlow came to himself a little short of it, and said, "You must come in, Copperfield, and rest." And I, consenting, we had sandwiches and wine and water. In the light room, Dora, blushing, looked so lovely that I could not tear myself away, but sat there staring in a dream until the snoring of Mr. Spenlow inspired me with sufficient consciousness to take my leave. So we parted. I, riding all the way to London with the farewell touch of Dora's hand still light on mine, recalling every incident and word 10,000 times, lying down in my own bed at last, as enraptured a young noodle as ever was carried out of his 5 wits by love. When I awoke next morning, I was resolute to declare my passion to Dora and know my fate. Happiness or misery was now the question. There was no other question that I knew of in the world, and only Dora could give the answer to it. I passed 3 days in a luxury of wretchedness, torturing myself by putting every conceivable variety of discouraging construction on all that had ever taken place between Dora and me. At last, arrayed for the purpose at a vast expense, I went to Miss Mills's, fraught with a declaration. How many times I went up and down the street and round the square, painfully aware of being a much better answer to the old riddle than the original one, before I could persuade myself to go up the steps and knock is no matter now. Even when at last I had knocked and was waiting at the door, I had some flurried thought of asking if that were Mr. Blackboy's, in imitation of Mr. Barkis, begging pardon and retreating. But I kept my ground. Mr. Mills was not at home. I did not expect he would be. Nobody wanted him. Miss Mills was at home. Miss Mills would do. I was shown into a room upstairs where Miss Mills and Dora were. Jip was there. Miss Mills was copying music. I recollect it was a new song called Affection's Dirge, and Dora was painting flowers. What were my feelings when I recognized my own flowers, the identical Covent Garden market purchase? I cannot say that they were very like, or that they particularly resembled any flowers that have ever come under my observation, but I knew from the paper round them, which was accurately copied, what the composition was. Miss Mills was very glad to see me and very sorry her papa was not at home, though I thought we all bore that with fortitude. Miss Mills was conversational for a few minutes, and then, laying down her pen upon affection's dirge, got up and left the room. I began to think I would put it off till tomorrow.
I hope your poor horse was not tired when he got home at night, said Dora, lifting up her beautiful eyes. It was a long way for him.
I began to think I would do it today. It was a long way for him, said I, for he had nothing to uphold him on the journey.
Wasn't he fed, poor thing?
Asked Dora. I began to think I would put it off till tomorrow. Yes, I said. He was well taken care of. I mean, he had not the unutterable happiness that I had in being so near you. Dora bent her head over her drawing and said, after a little while, I had sat in the interval in a burning fever and with my legs in a very rigid state.
You didn't seem to be sensible of that happiness yourself at one time of the day.
I saw now that I was in for it, and it must be done on the spot.
You didn't care for that happiness in the least, said Dora, slightly raising her eyebrows and shaking her head, when you were sitting by Miss Kit.
Kit, I should observe, was the name of the creature in pink with the little eyes.
Though certainly I don't know why you should, said Dora, or why you should call it a happiness at all, but of course you don't mean what you say, and I am sure no one doubts your being at liberty to do whatever you like. Jip, you naughty boy, come here.
I don't know how I did it. I did it in a moment. I intercepted Jip. I had Dora in my arms. I was full of eloquence. I never stopped for a word. I told her how I loved her. I told her I should die without her. I told her that I idolized and worshipped her. Jip barked madly all the time. When Dora hung her head and cried and trembled, my eloquence increased so much the more. If she would like me to die for her, she had but to say the word and I was ready. Life without Dora's love was not a thing to have on any terms. I couldn't bear it and I wouldn't. I had loved her every minute, day and night, since I first saw her. I loved her at that minute to distraction. I should always love her, every minute to distraction. Lovers had loved before and lovers would love again, but no lover had loved, might, could, would, or should ever love as I loved Dora. The more I raved, the more Jip barked. Each of us in his own way got more mad every moment. Well, Dora and I were sitting on the sofa by and by, quiet enough, and Jip was lying in her lap, winking peacefully at me. It was off my mind. I was in a state of perfect rapture. Dora and I were engaged. I suppose we had some notion that this was to end in marriage. We must have had some, because Dora stipulated that we were never to be married without her papa's consent. But in our youthful ecstasy, I don't think that we really looked before us or behind us, or had any aspiration beyond the ignorant present. We were to keep our secret from Mr. Spenlow, but I am sure the idea never entered my head then that there was anything dishonorable in that. Miss Mills was more than usually pensive when Dora, going to find her, brought her back. I apprehend because there was a tendency in what had passed to awaken the slumbering echoes in the caverns of memory. But she gave us her blessing and the assurance of her lasting friendship, and spoke to us generally as became a voice from the cloister. What an idle time it was. What an insubstantial, happy, foolish time it was. When I measured Dora's finger for a ring that was to be made of forget-me-nots, and when the jeweller to whom I took the measure found me out and laughed over his order book and charged me anything he liked for the pretty little toy with its blue stones, so associated in my remembrance with Dora's hand that yesterday, when I saw such another by chance on the finger of my own daughter, there was a momentary stirring in my heart like pain. When I walked about, exalted with my secret and full of my own interest, and felt the dignity of loving Dora and of being beloved so much that if I had walked the air I could not have been more above the people not so situated who were creeping on the earth. When we had those meetings in the garden of the square and sat within the dingy summer house, so happy that I love the London sparrows to this hour for nothing else, and see the plumage of the tropics in their smoky feathers. When we had our first great quarrel within a week of our betrothal, and when Dora sent me back the ring enclosed in a despairing cocked hat note wherein she used the terrible expression that our love had begun in folly and ended in madness, which dreadful words occasioned me to tear my hair and cry that all was over. When, under cover of the night, I flew to Miss Mills, whom I saw by stealth in a back kitchen where there was a mangle, and implored Miss Mills to interpose between and avert insanity. When Miss Mills undertook the office and returned with Dora, exhorting us, from the pulpit of her own bitter youth, to mutual concession and the avoidance of the desert of Sahara, when we cried and made it up, and were so blessed again that the back kitchen, mangle and all, changed to love's own temple, where we arranged a plan of correspondence through Miss Mills, always to comprehend at least one letter on each side every day. What an idle time! What an insubstantial, happy, foolish time! Of all the times of mine that time has in his grip, there is none that in one retrospect I can smile at half so much and think of half so tenderly. Thank you so much for joining us. I do hope you're enjoying this as much as me. I look forward very much to finding out what's going to happen tomorrow, same time at the same place, 5 Pacific, live at Fireside Reading on Instagram. All chapters uploaded to the YouTube channel, Fireside Reading. Until I see you all tomorrow, please stay very well. Good night.